traveling all over the world, exploring various shamanic paths, various number of psychoactive plants, and he's here to talk about their different modalities of how humans have been using them. So give it for Chris Kilham.
So I imagine that in a post-prohibition era, we could give psychedelics to our politicians and lawmakers and potentially cure many tens of thousands of cases of chronic rectal cranial inversion. I can imagine in a post-prohibition era that before every meeting of the United Nations General Assembly, the delegates all get together for a couple of nights of drinking ayahuasca with talented shamans. And I would imagine that the policies that they would come up with afterwards would be quite different. You can see Vladimir Putin sitting on his mat after a ceremony, just kind of his face in his hands, and Barack Obama sitting beside him, and Putin says, oh man, what a night. Obama says, what happens? He says, we just got to stop invading everybody. This is terrible. I really have this realization we're doing bad things. And Obama says, yeah, I know, we have to stop our preemptive wars. And it goes on like this. What is the future for a post-prohibition era? For one thing, we could anticipate better quality control with regard to psychedelics overall. I mean, it's not like these days most people can guarantee that they're getting MDMA, can guarantee that they're getting psilocybin, can guarantee that they're getting uncontaminated LSD, can guarantee that the ayahuasca that they're about to swallow is really ayahuasca. We can't know this. That's the fact of the matter. And yes, we may know a guy who knows a guy, and it comes from a reliable source, blah, blah, blah. But unless you have a testing lab, you don't really know what you're getting. It is possible in a post-prohibition era that we could have some actual quality control. So if you want to buy 100 mics of acid, you get your 100 mic little white Sandoz capsules, and you know you're getting the right thing, or the right mescaline, or the right psilocybin. This is certainly one dimension of what could happen. Do we want to see the commoditization of these agents? Do we want to see these made large scale by great big pharma companies or pharma-like companies and the same capitalist model that has been happening with everything else? We don't necessarily want to see that, but it will happen. It will happen. As soon as cannabis is legal all over the United States, R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris and American Tobacco will in fact be pumping out the blunts by the tens of millions in their cellophane-wrapped packages. And yes, you may wish to grow at home, but the fact of the matter is they're just rubbing their hands at the sides of the stage waiting for the lights to come on. We will see this with the psychedelics. We will see the big producers. It can't be helped. This is the way people think. And yes, but this also opens up a great market. We can have our whole artisanal psychedelics market, you know? Yeah, you can buy your acid from, Sandoz, but we make our acid naked after doing ayahuasca and dancing around a fire, chanting the Heart Sutra mantra. So, come on. Are you going to buy theirs when they're just industrial sellouts, or are you going to buy it from us because we make it with virtue and dignity and grace, and we do, in fact, keep all pubic hairs out of it? We'll see that, too. What do we imagine for a post-prohibition era? That we can start to take mind-body medicine seriously. Klonopin is not mind medicine. It is a way of deactivating systems in the body so you can be dull. Xanax is not mind medicine. It's just another way to suppress certain activity in the little almond-shaped organelles in the brain that are responsible for anxiety, the amygdala. We can do this all day long. And look who made the big famous drugs. Who invented ecstasy? Merck. Merck invented ecstasy. This wasn't like some hippie in a basement and said, I got a great idea. I'm going to make a drug that'll make people fall in love with absolutely everything. That didn't happen. Ecstasy is a drug. It was already, made by Merck. LSD, discovered at Sandoz. Who got the United States hooked on cocaine? Hart Davis. That's who got us hooked on cocaine. Who made heroin? Bayer, as a treatment for morphine addiction. It worked. You don't need many morphine addicts these days. So we already have these gigantic entities that are involved with and have been involved with drugs forever. And believe me, if there's an opportunity for them to make money on ecstasy or acid or whatever, buy a brand of ecstasy you can depend on. Go for squid. We're going to see these ads. It's not just going to be Schiff krill oil advertising on CNN. It's going to be other if you've got a weekend to spare, have we got a ride for you? All of the Madison advertising that we've seen with everything else, it's going to happen with psychedelics. The better ecstasy, it's inevitable. Now with caffeine, it's inevitable. We will see real investigation into interdimensional consciousness. It's inevitable as well. How many of you have watched some of the old U.S. Army videos of soldiers given acid? Okay, they're very amusing, partly because the commentaries are straight. The soldiers now appear not to be obeying orders. Really? Really? Okay, yes. Why? Because these agents are agents of non-complicity and non-compliance. And so it's really wicked hard when you're just massively tripped out on acid to figure out why there's any virtue in following the order to march in a straight line. There's just no such thing. And so you see these guys wander off and lie down on the lawn and basically become useless as soldiers. So it was in that sense a failed experiment, giving acid to soldiers. But we will see investigation into other dimensions, interdimensional consciousness. We know through physics that there are, the physicists haven't gotten quite as far as the Tibetan yogis. The Tibetan yogis have identified 49 dimensions. The physicists are running at about 11. They're doing a little bit of cosmic catch-up right now. But we can, through our own excursions, investigate some of these dimensions. And people say, well, wait a minute, that's not very scientific. What's not scientific about that? Well, how do you do that with instrumentation? You use the most sophisticated, integrated instrumentation that has ever been built, and that is the human body-mind system. Think of all the organoleptic testing you do all the time, using your organs to test things. You test water, the temperature of water. You test the temperature outside. You determine how wet things are. You determine how hot foods are. You determine how sweet things smell. Constantly, we're using these apparatus. And with the psychedelics, we're going to see a development of extrasensory perception, if you will, in terms of investigating the different dimensions that the psychedelics open up for us. And this is very exciting. We get to learn about the space inside us and the space in which we live. What do we see for a post-prohibition era? We see Dharma drugs. Dharma drugs, what a concept. That to help fulfill some of the spiritual experiences and perceptions that we know can be had and that many people have had and that people write about, it is possible as part of your practice, and not as the only thing in your practice, to consume ayahuasca, to consume the psilocybin mushrooms, to consume San Pedro cactus, to consume peyote, and in doing so, gain this, ever greater luminous consciousness, this expanded sense of interconnectedness with all things. And that is something that you take then out of that experience with you as part of your navigational information for moving around in the world. And so yoga and meditation and Tai Chi and various integrative practices in conjunction with the regular, intelligent, thoughtful use of the psychedelics can accelerate spiritual understanding, can accelerate full awareness of the essence of all things, can greatly enhance our sense of unity. And how is that valuable? Is that just self-indulgence? Or does it make some sense beyond me, 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 I? The implications are obvious. Take something like the United States doctrine of global domination, not a conspiracy theory thing here, not Mel Gibson, look it up. Been going on since the Truman era, and it basically says that we, as 6.3% of the global human population, have a right to control and have access to the resources that we currently do, 50% of the world's total wealth, and that if our interests are threatened, we have the right, we reserve the right to engage in preemptive wars. In other words, we start the fight first. And we've seen ourselves doing that repeatedly in positions in which we have perceived that our interests might possibly be at risk. And what has happened? Massive suffering, death, destruction, mutilation, the upsetting of whole cultures. What good has come out of this? Has war ever stopped war? No. But if enough people do go through life with the sense of all things being connected, of all people being connected, of all humanity being one, of everybody being in this together as one large conscious growing entity and organism, not separate and apart from each other and polarized and suspicious of each other and wary of each other's lives and backgrounds and thoughts and interests, then the very notion of withholding from the rest of the 93% of the world's population, then the very notion of deserving to eat at the table first before everybody else and let them have the scraps becomes a ludicrous, inhumane, baseless, irresponsible philosophy for the perpetuation of misery. So we will see a lot of thought around how do we take the psychedelic experience, which is in and of itself extraordinary, gratifying, often relieves people of great burdens, sorrow, grief, trauma, things that, you might spend 20 years in a therapist's office talking about over and over again and not getting through, and sometimes can get through in an evening. In addition to this, there's also the potentially global effect. If we are attentive to these things in a conscious way, and it all depends on how we utilize them. One of the concerns I have as somebody who has been deeply involved with the ceremonial use of ayahuasca is that I know the value of being in the ceremonial space with the shamans, with the people who are trained to guide and experience to maximize the opportunity. You can give somebody a trumpet and say, here, have fun, and they can make some god-awful noises. Actually, my friend Kenny Fiore in school even took lessons, and he still made god-awful noises. Or, you can get instruction, you can get guidance, you can get training, you can be aided, you can be assisted, you can learn the scales, and you can take that same instrument and you can play extraordinary music. So one of the concerns I have about the post-prohibition era, where people can basically take, MAO inhibitors and DMT-containing agents of different kinds and cook them up in the kitchen and try it and see what happens, is that people may not get the maximum benefits of the experience that they could have. We will see that too. Just as we have changed many traditions, look at what martial arts used to be in antiquity, largely monastic arts. Look at what yoga used to be in antiquity around the time of the writing of the yogic scriptures as a body-mind exploration extraordinaire, really focused on the absolute realization of the unity of all things and full expression of love in this physical incarnation. Very, very good stuff. It wasn't better butt yoga at the YMCA. And we're going to see the better butt yoga at the YMCA versions of psychedelic use. We are going to see this. We already see this. I just hope we don't see, ayahuasca ultimate frisbee. Messy, messy, messy. Terribly so. Terribly so. We'll see the development and creation of new drugs. There's no reason to think that Albert Hoffman topped off the tank, or that Sasha Shulgin kind of signed the last dot at the end of the sentence. We're going to see lots and lots and lots more drugs coming out. Why do I favor the plant drugs? This gets back to the question that sort of got tossed out into midair and then dissolved like a little piece of fog a little while ago. Why plant medicines? Let me tell you. We've evolved with plants since the very beginning of time. They're part of our biology. They are part of our physiology. We could not live without them. We couldn't breathe without them. We exist because of plants. Plants are part of our metabolism. If you look at Da Vinci's comparisons between plants and people, the comparisons are staggering, extraordinary. We're very, very similar to plants in many ways. We make homes out of them, we drink their juices, we eat them for nourishment, we use them as medicines, we satisfy ourselves sensually with their aromas, we use them to make decorations of all different kinds. We also take certain plant preparations to explore the spirit landscape. What about the same thing with synthetic drugs? I'm not throwing them all out the window, but the truth of the matter is we didn't evolve with those chemicals and compounds. We don't have the same mechanisms for metabolizing them that we do with plants. That means that we have to find ways to break them down or store them or get rid of them. So these are great unknowns. In my estimation, the plant medicine psychoactives, and I include the fungal preparations in that category, even though fungus aren't plants. These things are part of our evolutionary history. And what do we know about our evolutionary history? We know that we keep inheriting this 4 million miles or so of genetic material per person that we call our DNA. And we know that our DNA is constantly giving off light photon emissions. And there's suspicion that these photon emissions may actually be like radio waves, and they may possibly be communicating with each other. So that my DNA is talking to yours, and our DNA in combination is talking to the carrots when we walk through the field. And that the difference between us and shamans is that we're not necessarily conscious of all the communication that's going on between us and plants because we're more involved with our iPads. But that in fact, those people, no, seriously, those people who grow up focusing on that are much more attuned to this communication. So as we go pell-mell forward into the future, and we can't help but do that, at the same time, let's take great care to learn from the archaic technologies. Maybe you're not going to go down to the Amazon and participate in a ceremony in a maloca with a thatched hut while the breeze is blowing gently through and you're listening to the frogs outside. which is a really great sound when you're totally, massively tripped out on a lot of ayahuasca, especially when there are thousands of them doing that. You may not do that, but we can learn from the actual methodology of ceremony. My friend Alejandro, who's a shaman in Lima, spent some time with me teaching me about ceremony, and basically there are different phases, and those of you who've gone through traditional psychedelic ceremonies know this to be so. In the beginning, there's always the starting up process. It's kind of like warming up the car. It may be the shaman slowly shaking the shakapa, the leaf rattle, getting the energy going, starting that initial acceleration, that build-up of what is to come. And then there are other phases of ceremony. The phase where you encounter the worst parts about yourself, your fears, your anxiety, the darkness, the things that you would like to change. And then there's even greater acceleration still. There is an art to ceremonies. Can we take the methodology, can we take that methodology from antiquity and find ways to apply it in our much more modern, not necessarily better, but certainly different lives and civilization? Is that one of the things we'll see in a post-prohibition society? I say yes. I say yes. I say that instead of drugging our soldiers senseless when they come back from wars, preemptive wars like Kuwait and Iraq and Afghanistan, instead of giving them Klonopin, instead of giving them Ambien, instead of giving them Prozac, and watching them just go down the tubes, because all those things do is create toxicity in the body and confuse the mind even further and suppress the very things they're trying to get through. That we can have legitimate psychedelic therapy. That these people who have served their nation and have done their best and been put at enormous risk and been greatly harmed and have seen things no people should have to see, and have participated in things no person should have to participate in, can get the help they need. I see this as a great promise in a post-prohibition world. I also see the non-complicity and non-compliance that is typical of the psychedelic experience, perhaps eroding our willingness to participate in a lot of these entities and organizations in the first place. Why are people fleeing churches in droves? Why are they doing it? Why are they throwing their microphones around? They're doing that because they're not getting the experience they seek. What experience do people want? There is a native expression that says, the white man goes into church and hears about God. The native goes into church and talks with God. The latter referring to a peyote ceremony. Why would we insist on putting ourselves through a certain situation in which we bring ourselves time and again to the door of a large real estate holding entity, listen to priests or pundits or ministers or whatever telling us about people in antiquity who had spiritual experiences, when we can sit down, eat the button, eat the mushroom, drink the ayahuasca, drink the San Pedro, get the 2 grams of yapa blown up into our sinuses through a bifurcated turkey bone, whatever it is, and have that direct encounter with spirit. Because what is spirit? Spirit is the essence of all life. That's what spirit is. It's not an entity owned by a trademarked church. It is not the sole purview of one ism, one ology, or one osophy. It doesn't belong to any of them. Spirit is the basic, essential, thing from which all arises. And we are all part of this. And so, with the end of prohibition, we may see a great ability on the part of many thinkers to grapple with spirit and to understand our historic attempts at dealing with this through institutions as, in some cases, very well-intentioned and in some cases very poorly intentioned interpretations of a fundamental formless essence. Krishnamurti said, truth is a pathless land. Nobody owns truth. Nobody owns spirit. Nobody has all the answers. Because spirit itself is beyond answers. It's beyond the explanation. It is non-linguistic. It is translinguistic. So as we consider a post-prohibition era, definitely there's the part about fewer people being jailed for what we call now as drug crimes. That's a good positive thing. We definitely will see changes in healthcare as people have the freedom to explore what's possible with things. If people are going to die of cancer, if people have a terminal disorder, if they can be relieved of their fear, if they can be relieved of their anxiety by being given something like psilocybin or some other psychedelic agent, why wouldn't we do it? Do we have the compassion to put mistaken, failed notions aside and let suffering people find relief? That's something that I see in the post-prohibition era. I see the era of the Dharma drugs, those agents that don't substitute for additional other types of spiritual practice, but are perfect adjuncts to those practices and help to enliven those practices and enrich us body, mind, and spirit. And I see the possibility, if we can keep ourselves from just turning this into another consumer bonanza, another big dollar circus, which certainly is going to be part of it, no question. I see us being able to go further in human consciousness than we have gone before, partly as a result of more people using psychedelics, and partly as a result of the freedom to have the conversation openly in a society that no longer takes free-thinking people and throws them in jail. Thank you very much.